What if the gaming industry as you know it, the release dates, the platforms, the entire competitive scene, was shaped not by visionary planning, but by a series of accidents, coincidences, and decisions that nobody at the time fully understood? Not corporate strategy, not market research, a police complaint, a file upload that broke the internet, a coin shortage that never actually happened. Some of the most consequential moments in gaming history have been told wrong for decades. And the real versions of those stories are far more interesting than the myths. This is what actually happened. Let's start in Japan. February of 1988. A game called Dragon Quest III is about to go on sale, and the lines outside Japanese toy stores and electronics shops have been building since before dawn. By the time the doors open, roughly 400 Japanese schoolchildren have skipped class to be there. And by the end of that day, every single one of them has been detained by local police for truancy. Nearly 400 arrests in a single morning for a video game. Now here's what you've probably heard, that this incident prompted the Japanese government to pass a law, sometimes called the Dragon Quest Law, banning weekday game releases. It's a great story. It's in documentaries. It gets repeated constantly. And according to an academic investigation published in the magazine in January of 2014, and later confirmed by Dragon Quest I team, producer Yumi Yake, in a 2018 interview reported by Nintendo Soon, it is almost entirely false. No such law was ever passed. No government ban was ever written. What actually happened was simpler and in some ways more revealing about how industries really change. The police called Enix directly. According to Miyake's own account of that conversation, the message was blunt. You guys need to do something about this. That was it. No legislation, no formal mandate, just a phone call from law enforcement to a game publisher, and Enix made a voluntary decision to restrict all future Dragon Quest releases to weekends. That one private agreement reshaped Japan's entire game release calendar for decades. It influenced how other major publishers scheduled their launches, and here is the detail that tends to get overlooked. It even played a role in how Sega scheduled Sonic the Hedgehog's releases in Japan. Which brings us to the next piece of this story. Because while Enix was quietly committing to weekend launches in Japan, a company on the other side of the Pacific was about to invent something the entire industry takes for granted today. The concept of a game having a release date at all. Before 1992, games were not released like movies or albums. They were distributed like toys, shipped to retail in batches, appearing on shelves gradually over days or weeks, with no coordinated moment, no event, no date circled on a calendar. According to SpriteCell's analysis of release date history, the industry simply didn't treat software launches as media events. That was a toy industry model, and it was the default. Sega changed that. On November 24, 1992, a Tuesday, Sega of America coordinated what would become the first simultaneous global game launch in history. They called it Sonic 2's Day. Every copy of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 hit every shelf in North America on the same day, at the same moment, by design. Al Nilsson, who was Sega of America's head of global marketing at the time, later gave a detailed account of the campaign to Time Extension in November of 2022. The strategy was deliberate. Make a game release feel like an event, the way a film premiere feels like an event. It worked. And it worked so completely that the entire industry followed. Tuesday became the default North American release day for games for years afterward. The concept of a launch date is a cultural moment. Something fans count down to, something retailers prepare for, something companies build marketing cycles around. Traces directly to that one promotional stunt by Sega in the early 90s. Now, if you think that's an unlikely pivot point for an entire industry, wait until you hear what a single hardware decision did to the relationship between Nintendo and one of their closest creative partners. By the mid-90s, Square, the studio behind Final Fantasy, had been effectively a Nintendo exclusive developer for over a decade. The relationship was deep. And then, for the Nintendo 64, Nintendo made a choice. They would stick with cartridges instead of switching to CD-ROM. Square ran the numbers. According to their own account, Later reported by Nintendo in September of 2017, the calculation was not complicated. The game they were building, Final Fantasy VII, simply could not fit on a ROM cartridge, and Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of the Final Fantasy series, confirmed in a radio interview on J-Wave, later reported by Automaton Media in February of 2024, that the decision was never really about choosing Nintendo versus Sony. It was about choosing cartridge versus CD-ROM. There was no rivalry, no drama, no negotiation breakdown. There was just a storage limit that made one platform impossible. A second factor sealed it. Sakaguchi confirmed that producing a cartridge version of the game at the required size would have pushed the retail price above 10,000 yen, an amount that, in their estimation, Japanese consumers simply would not pay. The CD-ROM format made the economics work. The cartridge format made them impossible. The result? A decade-long alliance ended. Final Fantasy moved to PlayStation permanently, and according to former PlayStation executive Shuhei Yoshida, whose account was reported by My Nintendo News, none of this was part of any grand Sony strategy. At the time, as Fortune noted in a March 2019 retrospective, nobody had confidence in PlayStation. The platform won a major franchise not because of a deal, but because of a technical constraint that Nintendo had chosen not to resolve. That decision is one of the clearest examples in gaming history of how infrastructure choices, something as unglamorous as storage medium, can permanently redirect the creative output of an entire media. But if you want to see how infrastructure decisions ripple even further than anyone anticipated, you have to look at what happened in December of 1993, when ID Software uploaded a shareware version of a game called Doom to an FTP server at the University of Wisconsin. The server crashed immediately, not gradually, not under sustained load, immediately. The download rush was so sudden and so overwhelming that system administrators at the time reportedly called it the Doom Flood. A detail documented by Highs Online and Classic Gamer Hub. The game spread in ways that had no historical precedent for software distribution. By late 1995, according to the Doom Wiki, Doom was estimated to be installed on more computers worldwide than Windows 95, despite Microsoft spending millions of dollars on Windows 95 advertising. John Carmack confirmed in a PC Gamer interview in November of 2008 that Microsoft had actually commissioned an internal study to investigate this. Their conclusion: Doom was beating their flagship operating system on its own launch hardware. Microsoft's response to this is the part of the story that almost nobody tells. Rather than ignore the problem, they decided to solve it by co-opting it. A team inside Microsoft, led by a relatively unknown employee at the time named Gabe Newell, ported Doom to Windows for free, without ID Software's direct labor involved. The result was called Doom 95, and it became the first game ever published using Microsoft's new DirectX application programming interface, which is a set of tools that allows software to communicate directly with hardware for high-performance applications. According to the Alex St. John Wikipedia entry in the Doom Wiki, the DirectX team worked with ID Software specifically to use Doom as the launch title for this new infrastructure. That is the direct origin of the PC gaming technical stack that every Windows game in the world runs on today. Not a strategic vision, not a product roadmap, a crisis response to a shareware game that crashed a university server. And Gabe Newell, who led that port, went on to found Valve Software. Now, there is one more piece of this puzzle that involves an accident even more improbable than anything we have covered so far, because it required two entirely unrelated crises to collide in the same country at the same moment. In 1997, South Korea's economy collapsed. The International Monetary Fund bailout that followed is now simply called the IMF crisis in Korean public memory. Unemployment spiked. White-collar workers who had been laid off found themselves with time and very little capital, and a significant number of them opened small businesses with low overhead. Internet cafes, called PC bangs. The South Korean government had, for unrelated infrastructure reasons, already invested heavily in nationwide broadband rollout, and that infrastructure was largely underutilized at the time. The PC bangs gave it a consumer use case almost overnight. According to figures reported by MIT Technology Review in December of 2019, South Korea went from approximately 14,000 broadband-connected households in 1998 to 10.4 million by 2002. That is a 700-fold increase in 4 years. By February of 2001, according to broadband penetration data cited in an analysis published on Medium, 57.3% of Korean internet home users had broadband access. In the United States at that same moment, the figure was 11.1%. Into this environment, accidentally, with no localization, no Korean language version, no marketing strategy for South Korea, Blizzard Entertainment released StarCraft in 1998. MIT Technology Review confirms that Blizzard had not even bothered to adapt the game for the Korean market. The game found it anyway. The PC bangs needed a multiplayer game that could run on the available hardware. StarCraft was there, and what followed was the creation of professional competitive gaming as a structured, televised industry. By 2008, an estimated 15 million South Koreans, roughly 31% of the country's entire population, were active esports fans. The Korean Air Force created an official professional StarCraft team specifically so that players could fulfill their mandatory military service without having to retire from competitive play. That detail, documented by Retromo and confirmed across multiple Korean gaming history sources, might be the single most concrete measure of how seriously one country took a competitive scene that began essentially because a foreign company accidentally launched into a perfect economic storm. There is one more story in this chain, and this one runs in the opposite direction. It's not about a myth that turned out to be true. It's about a story that the gaming industry has told so many times, and with such confidence that almost no one ever questioned it. You almost certainly heard that Space Invaders, the arcade game released by Taito in 1978, caused a nationwide shortage of 100 yen coins in Japan. It's in textbooks. It was prominently repeated in Netflix's High Score documentary series. It is one of the foundational legends of early gaming history. It is almost certainly false. An academic study published by Charles Paradis at the Currency Museum of the Bank of Canada, titled Insert Coin to Play, Space Invaders, and the 100 Yen Myth, found that production of Japanese 100 yen coins did not increase markedly during the heyday of Space Invaders. The Gamer, covering this research in March of 2020, stated the conclusion plainly. Fewer 100 yen coins were minted in 1978, and any spent on Space Invaders would have remained in circulation. The actual 100 yen coin shortage in Japan during that period appears to trace to a change in coin metal composition years earlier, one that prompted people to melt down older silver. What's interesting about this isn't just that the story is wrong. It is how it spread and why. The myth was good for the gaming industry. It made a new form of entertainment sound culturally transformative from its very first year. It made arcades sound like an unstoppable social force. And as Paradis's research documents, it appears to have been amplified, if not originated, by Taito's own marketing. A fabricated or heavily exaggerated anecdote, repeated enough times by enough authoritative voices, became accepted history. It was even picked up by a major streaming documentary decades later with no apparent fact-checking. That is worth sitting with for a moment. The gaming industry has a documented tendency to absorb its own mythology, to repeat the dramatic version of events until it calcifies into received wisdom. Dragon Quest causing a government law that never existed. Space Invaders draining the national coin supply. The dramatic rivalry that ended Final Fantasy on Nintendo, which was actually just a math problem. The real history is stranger, more contingent, and more interesting than the myths. Industries aren't shaped by visionaries working from master plans. They're shaped by police phone calls, storage limits, university server crashes, and financial crises in countries that the relevant companies had never even tried to market to. If you find yourself wanting more of this, the real sourced, properly complicated version of how gaming and technology actually developed, this channel is built around exactly that. New research, verified claims, and the stories that didn't make it into the official version. Subscribe if that's the kind of thing you want more of. There is significantly More of it coming.